Okay. The next item is item number 12, application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, docket number 15-6702, block 673, lot 1, 220 to 224 12th Avenue in the West Chelsea Historic District, a complex of American Round Arch style warehouse buildings designed by George B. Mallory and Otto M. Beck and built in 1890 to 91. This is an application to establish a master plan governing the future installation of rooftop mechanical equipment. This was also read into the record on June 3rd and is being presented for the first time today.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Hillary Paget, Preservation Department staff. This property is bounded by 11th Avenue to the east, 12th Avenue to the west, West 28th Street to the north, and West 27th Street to the south. Current and historic photographs show the building in its context at the corner of 11th Avenue and West 28th Street. The applicant is proposing to establish a building-wide master plan governing the installation of rooftop mechanical units. The roof plan indicates the maximum number of units, as well as minimum setbacks from the face of the building, and that's shown dashed in red. Elevations show the maximum heights of the proposed units. The visibility of the largest cooling tower units and 3 of the air handler units located closest to the building facades were tested with mock-ups. The cooling tower is clearly visible from multiple vantage points north of the project site. And you can see here is one of the smaller units. The smaller air handler units are also visible from the north and from the piers in Riverside Park to the west of the site. And the design team is here to present the application.
Okay. Hearing will be open, please. A motion and a second. And whoever, identify yourself by name and add what you need to add or want to add. Thank you.
My name is David Spence, principal of Windigo Architects. We are the architecture firm working on the master plan of the building. Also, should you need any detailed information on the engineering, representative from Bureau Happold is here as well.
Okay.
Okay, as Hillary pointed out, this is the overall roof plan showing our master plan concept. The idea is to consolidate the number of mechanical units on the rooftop. What has been happening to date as a tenant moved in, they would get their own mechanical package that would end up on the roof. And now over time, the roof is running out of space. And so the intent here is to come up with an overall scheme that will manage the whole building, allow sort of a plug-and-play system for the tenants. And what we've done here is come up with a diagram that creates a zone, if you will, for where mechanical units can be replaced. What's shown here is the largest units. Those are the cooling towers. That is not, I should point out that that's where they are going. They are not meant to be within this zone, but right there. Number 2, the air handling units that are shown in plan highlighted are the ones that are in the photographs. And basically the factors that are governing where they are located are based on physical parameters on the roof and within the building. In some cases there are long-term tenants that would be difficult to disrupt. Also providing efficient distribution of routing of ductwork once in the building. And also spacing the units apart enough for code requirements in terms of air intakes and exhausts. In addition to cooling towers and air handling units, there are also smaller makeup air units and exhausts. Should restaurants move into the building, we'll be able to provide systems for those tenants. Those are much lower to the roof line. So you'll notice that in this instance it actually pokes outside of this red zone, but again with the parapet it won't be a factor. On the elevations, we show the engineers have picked out the largest unit available on the market at this time, and that's what's being represented in terms of its size and height. Here we have our sightline drawings. Obviously, on the 27th Street side, it would be very difficult to see any of the units because your back will be up against the stair Lehigh. As you move out to the north and towards the High Line, you'll start to see those views open up towards the units. This photograph represents, or image represents where we placed the photographs. Before I get to those photographs, these are some renderings of what the units would look like. And just want to point out that the Stair Lehigh building has similar units along the top where the water towers are. So you can kind of see the effect that we would have on our building. The exception being that with the Stair Lehigh in the background, they really blend into what is there. Also, they're most visible on the north side. However, because of the sun angles and all that, we don't anticipate them reflecting much light. They are intended to be painted a dark, very dark gray, almost black, similar to what we're doing with platforms and fire escapes. Also to absorb the light, not reflect it. And the intent, we discussed, we talked about screening them, but we decided to actually leave them in their raw manner, if you will, just sort of evoking the aesthetic, the industrial aesthetic throughout the neighborhood. And just some of these views and renderings, there are some buildings that are to the north, so there's going to be more of slotted views. And we anticipate once this area of Chelsea is built up, or Hudson Yards, the views will actually be less. And then just walking through some of the mock-ups, again, from 29th Street and north is where you would see the cooling towers the most. All the other stuff is behind the parapet.
Okay.
Yeah, so the ones that we felt you would actually see are the ones that we mocked up. So right here on the northwest and southwest corners are the ones that you would see. Everything else would be behind the parapet. The parapet is roughly, on average, 3 to 3.5 feet.
Okay.
Just a question about the analysis about whether it's painted or covered or whatever. If they were, since you have some building behind you, if they were either painted a color that blends in with that, or even like a continuation of the color of the buildings that they're sitting on, wouldn't that be less noticeable than that industrial look? I mean, you're saying they come in whatever color, so.
Well, we can select the color. It's not off-the-shelf gray that you see a lot of these units. The intent here is
Can you select a color that more or less blends with the background since you're close to blending?
right, and that's so the background in this case with Stair Lehigh is a combination of brick and glass and black. So our intent is, all our windows are black, canopies, platforms, fire escapes are all black. The windows in Stair Lehigh are black. So being metal objects, that's what we're, as opposed to trying to paint a brick red or anything like that we felt would stand out actually more.
Just that maybe black stands out a lot.
Okay. Yeah.
Here you can see it in
I
that
can't
rendering.
see it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
The lighting.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Just trying to understand this, so that the idea would be that there's a base on which each tenant sort of slips in a unit, and so that eventually they'll be abutting each other, right? Is that the idea?
No, these air handling units will serve multiple tenants.
Okay.
So it's not a unit per tenant, but rather, an overall unit. And Stuart can speak
Yeah,
to
I think
that.
historically, sorry.
Come
Up in the front.
Just state your name.
Identify.
Stuart Bridget, Bureau Hamilton Engineers.
Yeah.
Currently, each tenant has their own dedicated HVAC. The intent here is to provide a smaller consolidated number of pieces of equipment so that each tenant can just be, as they move in, can just connect to the system.
Oh, they connect to it, okay. So it's a very massive, it's not that it's empty in there in that enclosure, it's that it's actually filled with
Used.
units, right?
Yes,
Mhm, okay.
but that is the worst case size and the worst case location. So that we-
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Anything else to add?
Just wanted to
Yeah.
add too that, again, part of this master plan is to help, we're going to be eliminating a lot of the
Yeah.
rooftop equipment already there. So this
Yeah.
is all about consolidating
Sure.
and simplifying.
And you're
Okay.
assuming it's what height? What is the height of the,
It's 23.
Approximately 23 feet
and
measured
it's
from the
sitting on
ground.
the base?
That there is a dunnage underneath that includes the dunnage height, and floating above the roof, actually. So there's, exactly.
If you're taking off a lot of stuff on the roof, why is it that your perimeter is so darn close to the edge? Why can't you put all these units right down the middle, where they're much less likely to be seen, like your green units?
Well, for starters, these are concrete buildings here,
Right.
which are much higher. So the intent was to get outside of those. There's also the
Get
tunnel
outside-
that,
get
the tunnel that
outside of
also,
them,
in other words, not on top of them.
but aren't you going on top of them?
In this case, we
There?
are. In this case, we are.
Okay.
And then these will serve, because those concrete buildings, you're talking about creating shafts through all those concrete slabs.
Okay, but aren't you, how are you getting that one down there? Like, is there a shaft
There is an
right
existing
there?
shaft that we, elevator shaft that we can use, but that's not the case in every situation. The other reason is the tunnel runs down the middle. Some of these units, their shaft ways have to run all the way down to the basement, so we're bypassing the tunnel.
No, it just, all right.
And
But if they were a little further in, a little more inboard, right?
Still see a massive,
Do you still see them?
yeah, I think, would you,
the cooling towers, obviously,
yeah.
but, yeah, I mean, the intent is if, again, we're trying to create a zone of a worst-case scenario.
Yeah.
And just to recap to what was mentioned earlier, the criteria for locating of these was also to avoid, was to accommodate the existing equipment on the roof. For the existing equipment's code required clearances, etc. So if the requirement was to move equipment further in for the critical units that were marked up on the far left there, then those could absolutely move further in if other equipment was also relocated.
So if the idea is to clean up the roof,
But
But
this
it's-
happens over time.
this happens over time, right?
Right, it's
okay.
not one sweep, so we couldn't just remove all this tenant's equipment
Mm.
and put ours there and leave them sort of abandoned.
But for instance, in the situation of those pieces that are close to the edge, since it's a master plan to actually put them close to the edge, once the old equipment goes offline, couldn't some of that equipment that's on the edge be placed where the offline equipment is?
Potentially, yes.
So shouldn't the master plan accommodate the location of equipment where the old equipment is? So that it stays away from the edge?
No, because when we present for staff approval and we need to show a unit, let's say this unit has to happen this year, just for instance, but this equipment is still in operation for the next 8 years.
Yeah.
I can't show that this unit is going to go there in the master plan. I have to show that it will be here.
But what if it's not there? Then how does the master plan accommodate that? You know, so the equipment's gone in 3 years and you want to install that one unit, there's space there. How does the master plan enable you to put it in that space?
So is the green all the equipment or just the new? I mean, is that?
That's all the new equipment.
That's all
Yeah.
the new, but there's existing that's there that's not
That's
shown in
right.
green.
It's not shown in green, it's a lot of this, what you see
All
here.
that white stuff.
So
So I think that because this is intended to be a phased introduction of this centralized equipment, it is a worst case scenario. If, for example, as the master plan progresses and this equipment is progressively more and more approaching a full installation, if an opportunity arises for a more central location that is further away from the parapet, that can be taken advantage of.
Yeah, and Commissioner, just to add one piece for this, because the building's rooftop is so vulnerable to visibility from the north, it could be a situation where, you know, a dozen or more units could each have to come individually for a certificate of appropriateness application because they're
Right.
more than minimally visible. So the idea here was to create this zone where nothing will encroach beyond, and kind of giving you a sense of worst-case scenarios, but it may in fact be better than what they're showing. So they mocked up the worst-case scenario, but in fact, many of them may be able to move further inward from that red line, from that zone, once some of the older equipments are replaced.
But I think that
Okay.
what the commissioner is asking, and it sounds like you're willing to accommodate, if in fact there is an opportunity to move something away from the perimeter and inboard because the older equipment has since gone offline, that you would be open to doing that, and that could become a condition of the ATP, which is simply a statement that this is where it can go because, you know, or we can move it in. And I think that we're all in agreement that that could happen, and that would be preferable.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That is the intent.
Okay, good. So that with that proviso, or even without it, but I believe these are good. Thank you very much. There's testimony? No testimony. This building is a building that keeps one success after another, in my opinion, from the designation on to its thriving use and reuse. And this is, of course, a necessary step in that. And I think the master plan approach is perfect. The fact that it's worst case, and with what Mark just added being implicit in the approval, I'm totally in support and find it appropriate.
So do I. There's a rare building indeed in New York that you can't see something on the roof of, particularly buildings that were designed to be industrial-type buildings, and those that have been converted to less industry, more commercial, have, now that we are nice and cool in this very room, we have needs that were not there when these buildings were built. The only place to put them is on the roof. I think the question then is how they look when they're on the roof, where they are. I think this is a good master plan. It's pushing back from the edge, which is very important, but it allows for, over time, the replacement of units, which will be visible. I think the question of what color is an appropriate thing. I think black is maybe not quite the right color, but a gray would be less calling attention to itself up there, and I think that might be a more appropriate color.
Michael?
I agree with those statements, and I think that you know, we have the most capable staff in the country doing this sort of things, and if the applicant works with our staff to select colors that minimize visibility, then it's right on.
I agree, and I think that given the interest that the applicant has shown to try to make it in the best case, I think that the master plan as approved should reflect that intention, where the priority should be given at staff reviews for the units to be placed as close to the center as possible, in as uniform a relationship to one another as possible, and in as uniform a color as possible within the technical limitations imposed by the existing conditions. And I think that if that is the criteria, if those are the criteria by which the staff review these applications, I think that it'd be great to not have to review it every single time.
Yeah, nothing to add, I agree with that.
Yeah, so I think that in terms of it being a master plan that's really effective, some of the comments that were just made need to take place, because otherwise, what's to prevent worst case scenario from being the case scenario? Because if you already know that you can put it there, why would you, except it would save, yes, having to come each time, but I think that there needs to be something more constraining in the language that goes with this approval that says that you have to first try to place it somewhere where it isn't visible or where it's less visible, and that this is actually the worst case scenario, but not the first case.
I think that the staff will work with the applicant to come up with those that decision-making tree, okay?
And I think one important caveat to that is that even though that this commission's determination of those criteria is not dependent on what is most optimal from a mechanical point of view or an operational point of view, but from an aesthetic point of view and a visibility point of view. And that may involve a compromise of the optimal relationship between, let's say, a shaftway and a unit. You may have to have an extension of a duct or of pipes that maybe make it more expensive or maybe add some imperfection to the system, but that make it look better. We'll make sure that's part of it as well.
Okay. And with that, we'll close the hearing, please. Yeah, did you see enough? You
I
don't-
do feel
Yeah.
that I saw enough, and
Okay.
I concur with the
Yeah.
remarks of Commissioner Bland and Commissioner Goldblum, and I
Yeah.
do think that this is approvable with the, the work of staff to
Okay.
make sure that they do it the best they can.
Okay, hearing will be closed, and I'll do the certificate of appropriateness, West Chelsea, 220, 224 12th Avenue, West Chelsea Historic District. Recommend approval, finding that the establishment of a master plan governing the future replacement and installation of rooftop mechanical equipment, including cooling towers and condensing units, will define locations, maximum footprints, and heights and minimum setbacks from the primary facades, that the proposed group of large cooling towers to be installed at the center of the complex will not be visible over the prominent 11th Avenue and 12th Avenue facades, and although they will be visible primarily from the north and west, they will be seen in conjunction with the larger Starrett Lehigh building to the south, and will therefore not detract from the distinctive massing and silhouette of the building complex, that the roof historically and presently features water tanks and other visible mechanical equipment. Therefore, the proposed equipment is to be installed within a roofscape context which is characterized by massive mechanical equipment and will be consistent with the industrial design and character of this warehouse complex. That the proposed smaller individual condensing units are to be set back from and partially screened by the existing parapet walls, thereby minimizing the visual impact of these installations. That the proposed matte gray finish of all mechanical equipment, so it's not black, matte gray, but anyway, you're going to work on the colors with the staff, will not call undue attention to itself and will help visible units recede from view, and that the industrial buildings in the district historically had mechanical accretion on their roofs, and with all of the discussion about trying always not to find the worst case, but to try to find the best case as administered by the staff going forward, the proposed work overall, this master plan does not detract, from the architectural and historic character of the building complex and of the West Chelsea Historic District.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Approved. Thank you. Okay.